So I've seen a lot of people comment, especially internationally, about what's going on in Canada, and they, call out to Canadians. How can you afford to live there? How can you survive with all this tyranny and liberal taxation and the carbon taxes and everything that's going on? And, honestly, it's even shocking to me as a Canadian to even wonder, how are we surviving? How are we still maintaining this quote unquote country that's falling apart, that's in shambles, that we're seeing tent cities, we're seeing homelessness epidemic, we're seeing, just pouring of people, in long lines at food banks and whatnot. How are we able to maintain the stature of a country when everything seems to be falling apart? And especially with grim news like this. Like, this is something, of course, not a lot of people want to hear, but unfortunately, it's happening. Canadians paid 3.5% more for groceries in August. What is driving up the price? That's, of course, an article from the National Post. And diving into detail here, I know this is from Yahoo, just to want to clarify that I know this is Yahoo compared to National Post, but National Post put a paywall. And then Yahoo News took that article and published it on their site. So we're using their site to read the paywall from National Post. Kind of hilarious, right? So it says, Canadians thinking their grocery bills got more expensive in August are right. Food inflation rose 3.5% in August compared to the overall consumer price index, which rose 1.9%. The CPI is published regularly by Statistics Canada and reflects changes in prices of consumer goods and services. Comparing the cost of a fixed basket of such items such as food items, clothing, gas, cell phone service, and travel, it's the country's main measure of inflation. Much of the gap between August food inflation and the number of CPI can be attributed to broad global factors, such as higher transportation and energy costs within supply chains, as well as weather-related disruptions affecting produce and meat, according to the latest Loblaw food inflation report. So, what they're saying here is, they're not directly stating it, but things like the carbon taxes. And while people still believe that Mark Carney eliminated the carbon taxes, that is not what he did. He took the carbon taxes away from the consumer and put it to the industry, meaning that the consumer still pays for it. We just don't notice it right away. We don't see it immediately onto our bill, but putting it onto the hands of the industries and the big heads is going to spiral down and be this domino effect, so that it's going to increase the cost of the production, of transportation, which then leads the burden onto you. So instead of you looking at this and say, why do I have a, carbon tax charge on my receipt? All Mark Carney did was eliminate from you seeing that on your bill, but you're still paying for it. And frankly, I don't know why we still have a carbon tax at this point. Why that hasn't been eliminated. Why people have not, protested against it. Because it has done nothing for the planet, it has done nothing for the environment. And we know that there's an ongoing investigation that, as they've been trying to keep shut for such a long time, but people want an explanation on the Green Slush Fund. So why are we still doing this? Why are we still paying for carbon taxes at this time when no other country seems to be doing this carbon tax initiative? Nobody else is paying more to the government to make the climate better. And considering the fact the government has no intention of making things better. Just an absolute scam. So what is the impact of drought on food crops? In the Atlantic provinces, Quebec and parts of Ontario, rainfall was unusually low in August, notes the report. Crops such as corn, soybeans, blueberries, and root vegetables were stressed during critical growth phases, resulting in reduced yields. That means, says Loblaw's, grocer that has transitioned to imports earlier or sell products that may be a bit smaller than usual. Dry conditions also increase of irrigation and feed, particularly for forage crops and livestock. So, I'm not giving any credit to Loblaws, because we know that they're involved in their own scandals. They overcharge people on bread. Remember that? They overcharged people on bread. They got caught. And then people go to their stores, I guess, and they got like a credit for how much they got overcharged on bread. And they still do it. They're still overcharging people. But I guess they have been able to get better lawyers to not pull it out. But I find it weird. I do find it a bit weird, considering that we know about, geoengineering. We know about cloud seeding. We know that if they're able to manufacture rainfall in desert areas, we know what we saw in Dubai, how this is still an issue. And I'm not saying that I'm supportive of geoengineering and manipulating weather, but if you're saying that there's droughts occurring in farmland, couldn't you just make rainfall? Like, I don't understand how this is still a thing at this time when we know that there's abilities to manufacture weather events. And maybe this is intentional. Maybe all this is intentional that, hey, there's droughts about, farms seize up, they go bankrupt, and then they have to sell to a developer that they can manufacture homes and build communities that no one can afford their homes. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. We don't know for sure. How did the cost of meat products fare in August? Statistics Canada says one of the biggest increases came in prices for meat, which rose 7.2% year over year, following 4.7% increase in July. Higher prices for fresh or frozen beef and processed meat put upward pressure on CPI last month. Growth in prices for ground beef and multiple processed meat categories contributed the most to the upward movement. But, considering it's ground beef and cow farts are the most dangerous thing to the planet, not, blowing up a Nord Stream pipeline, not the over-militarization around the world, not the detonation of bombs and explosions that happen so frequently. We don't care about that environmental impact, but if a cow is in a meadow eating grass and farting, that then is going to produce into, organic meat, that's something we got to consider, taking action on, which is also probably a contributor to this. I'm just saying, they're not giving direct details of why this is happening. It's good that we have this information, but they're not telling you why specifically it's gone up. And that could be a possibility. I don't know. Just pointing that out there. Fruits and vegetables. It says on a positive note, year-over-year prices for fresh fruits fell 1.1% in August after increasing 3.9% in July, says Stats Canada. Prices declined for grapes and other fresh fruit, and berries, including cherries, contributed the most to the yearly price decrease for fresh fruit in August. Stat Canada acknowledged, as Loblaw stated in its reports, that prices for fresh fruit and vegetables are prone to seasonal volatility due to factors such as weather during the growing period. So, yeah, usually in August, especially here in Ontario, is predominant for fruit and vegetables for farmers, because that's usually the time when they start harvesting more and they sell at a local rate. So, yeah, it's more volatile during that time to get more fresh fruits and vegetables from local sources, local organic sources, than it would be to import. So, yeah, that could contribute to why it decreases. But, yeah, it doesn't really help the cause when, if you're a single person or a family of four trying to feed your families and you are paying an arm and a leg to feed them the basics, not even expanding to, certain cut meats or, top organic food, even just the boxed meals, which are unhealthy for you. It's such a burden to people. So that's where this comes in. What are struggle meals? And we showed this before. I think the CBC did a whole article about it. It says on September 14th, during question period, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre rose in the House of Commons to question Prime Minister Mark Carney about food inflation. Canadians are now experiencing what they call struggle meals, which he said are often of lower nutritional value because that's all they can afford. So they mean, the pre-box meals. So like your craft dinners, your hamburger helpers, the meals that used to be an only instance if you're in a rush. Like if it was a busy night for a family, you have ballet or soccer or whatever running around you got to do. You crack open a box of craft dinner, you crack open a box of hamburger helper, maybe some instant ramen noodles, whatever the case may be. It's enough to nourish you for that night, and you go on with your day. That's what they kind of mean for struggle meals. But that's become more frequent. And even dollar stores, Dollarama in particular, has seen a huge increase of customer flow since the high rise of inflation, because a lot of people can't go to regular grocery stores, so they go to Dollarama and dollar stores for these pre-boxed meals because that's what they can afford to feed themselves. So here's Pierre Poilievre. This is tweeting out exactly his question to Mark Carney. It says food prices rising faster in Canada than they are in the United States as the Carney Liberals continue to drive up costs with inflationary spending and high taxes. So here's Pierre Poilievre, this is from Rebel News, announcing that he had a plan with the Conservative Party, with members of his party, to reduce the grocery prices. And one of them was about cutting back on the taxes, on the amount of people that are paying in carbon taxes and GST and HST for certain grocery items. And here's his announcement on this, calling on the Liberals to take pursuit of his plan so that people can afford basic essentials like groceries.
I'm here today offering a message of hope. You do not have to live like this. You should be able to walk peacefully down grocery aisles, looking at the delicious meals that you're going to put together at home and enjoying that food, knowing that both your stomach and your bank account are full. That is the country we had, and that's the country we're going to restore. And today, Conservatives have a positive proposal. We're working with all parties on this proposal. It's a very simple idea. Stop taxing groceries. Let's end the industrial carbon tax on farm equipment and fertilizer so they can produce our food more affordably. Get rid of the new Liberal new carbon tax on diesel and gasoline. Let's get rid of the food packaging tax. Allow our grocery stores to use the most effective way of preserving food, which of course is plastic. Plastic, which is a fully recyclable, made in Canada substance that preserves food better than any other technology, should be allowed to be there so that we can have fresh food that lasts longer and people can enjoy for 3 or 4 more days before it spoils. And of course, get rid of the inflation tax. We're calling for Mark Carney to reverse his new spending increases, cap spending, cut bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid. We can't give money abroad when we're not feeding our own people at home. Charity starts at home. Cut foreign aid. Put the money into our country instead. Let's cut back on the handouts to phony asylum claimants. Stop paying for hotels for fake refugees. Get rid of the corporate welfare handouts to Mark Carney's insiders and friends. Let's bring down the deficit so that we don't have to print money anymore. Get rid of the inflation tax so that people's purchasing power lasts longer. These are positive proposals that will restore the promise of Canada, that hard work is rewarded. Food and homes are affordable. Streets are safe. Our borders solid. And our country united under a proud flag. This should once again be a country with strong paychecks that buy affordable food and homes. A country for all Canadians. And that's what we will work for as Conservatives. Thank you.
Seems very simple. Seems very honest and genuine. And he says it's for everybody. Like, how can you not agree with that? That, hey, you are a Canadian, charity starts at home. Let's keep our tax dollars within this country and stop foreign investments overseas. Stop paying for countries for gender studies or whatnot and paying for foreign conflicts like Ukraine and Israel. And worry about the situation here, because if we don't have a strong population, a strong workforce that can't afford the essentials like groceries, being able to nourish yourself, being able to have a roof over your head, you don't have a country. You don't have a country. You don't have sustainability to keep the Canadian identity alive. If your population, if majority of the people can't afford the basic necessities to keep up with themselves, it's the simple old Maslow hierarchy of needs. If they don't have nourishment and they don't have shelter, they don't have the basic necessities, how are you expecting them to facilitate more into the Canadian culture? Like, how do you expect a individual to be able to afford to raise a family and be involved and do this and do that if they can't meet the basic requirements of being a human being, which is nutrition, shelter, safety, like all the things that are the most important to any individual. So this should go, all around. It should be welcoming for everybody to understand that. But of course, as we showed before, they brought it to the House of Commons, and the Liberals and Greens and the NDP all voted against reducing the taxes of your grocery prices. And as Mark Nixon says, Canadians are skipping meals, food banks are overwhelmed, and these clowns say yes to higher grocery bills. Next time you shop, thank the Liberals for the higher price tag. So they voted to keep this going. And obviously, we know that the carbon taxes are in use to pay for the Green Slush Fund to keep more money in their pockets away from us. We know that's a part of it. We know that they're demonizing farmers, particularly to get seizure of their farmland. We know it happens in the Netherlands too, so Canada's not the only one participating in this. It's it's the billionaire class. This is what globalism does to countries. It deteriorates them. It kills off the very essence. That's why Mark Carney is the perfect prime minister for them and not for us. He's hand-selected to be the private equity prime minister to hollow out Canada and kill off the very essence of what Canadian identity is about. And people are really going to be ticked off once this news comes out. Tim Hortons, which, Tim Hortons, we've already discussed in length of how abhorrent it is. I've already stated my, personal boycott against them. But here's another one. Tim Hortons is raising their coffee prices, calls hike more than reasonable. So instead of going to Mark Carney and the current governments and stating why there's such an increase in coffee prices, they're just going to accept it. They're going to just go with it because it's going to be more money for them to keep on the government that's allowing them for temporary foreign workers, that's allowing them for, exploiting their workforce, exploiting their brand and the identity of Tim Hortons. And consumers, are probably still going to go to Tim Hortons not realizing all this. Oh, so they have to pay an extra few cents. They're not going to notice the fact that this popular Canadian brand, this identity, this iconic chain, it's no longer Canadian. It's no longer Canadian whatsoever. So it says the Canadian iconic coffee chain is charging more for a drink, reflecting a wider trend of jittery coffee prices. In a statement to CTV News, a Tim Hortons spokesperson said the restaurant chain is raising coffee prices for the first time in 3 years, suggesting that compared to inflation, the price increase of 1.5% per cup was more than reasonable. The prices of coffee beans has more than doubled, Tim Hortons says, according to MarketWatch.com. The price jumped from $2 to $2.21 to $5.45 per pound. That's a huge jump. That's more than doubled. More than doubled for coffee. That should alarm a lot of Canadians because that's our number one pastime is lining up at the drive-thru for your morning coffee or mid-afternoon or we're very coffee drinkers along here, including myself. But I stopped going to Tim Hortons again for a lot of reasons. The coffee chain said that the price hike would boil out to an average of 3 cents per cup. Outside of drive-thrus, Canadians pay $27.9% more than their coffees at grocery stores in August compared to the same time last year, Stats Canada reported last month. Canada imports nearly a quarter of its coffee from Colombia, with Brazil, Mexico, Peru, and Central American countries making up the rest. The coffee trade was valued at more than $1.3 billion in July, importing 131 million kilograms of unroasted coffee. Although most of Canada's unroasted coffees come from Mexico and further south, roasted coffee largely comes from the United States, according to Stats Canada. Canada imported 3.9 million kilograms of roasted coffee, mostly from the United States, in July 2025. Roasted coffee was among the products affected by U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on Brazil and were part of Canada's regulatory tariffs on the United States, StatsCan reported. The statistics agency said that the counter tariff measures were possibly affecting costs of some Canadian coffee importers. Food prices rose 3.5% in August, Loblaw reported in their September food inflation report. It found that food prices are rising faster than the consumer price index, which only bumped up 1.9% that month. Loblaw claimed that counter tariffs were raising prices for Canadians, but since September 1st, when most were dropped, products are back to the flowing through to customers. Loblaw also highlighted coffee in its report, saying coffee prices have climbed back near their 2025 highs, blaming the 50% U.S. tariffs on Brazil, the largest coffee exporter in the world. Loblaw suggested that buyers have to compete for alternative suppliers while Brazilian coffee growers are holding on to their beans and being cautious with their sales. U.S. tariffs and cautious Brazilian coffee growers are keeping global coffee markets volatile, Loblaw said. So, I can't really verify whether it's particularly the tariffs, if it's climate change, if it's Mark Carney's fault or Donald Trump or Brazil. I can't really put a finger and put the blame on one specific person, but I feel like this is the domino effect that's being created because of these catastrophes, because of Mark Carney's refusal to budge so that we can have cheaper groceries. The fact that we have carbon taxes afflicting all of our essential services. The fact that this tariff war continues to tremble important services, important, items that are being imported. Specifically coffee, because coffee beans are a product of South America. They have to be grown in tropic areas. Like, it'd be near impossible to try to grow and facilitate a coffee industry within Canada with our climate and our abilities. Like, it'd be near impossible. So if you weren't worried about the grocery prices and weren't, peeved off that the Liberal Party, the Green Party, the NDP voted against measures to, lower grocery prices, I'm sure this is going to spark a lot of, hatred, a lot of anger when you go to your local Tim Hortons for that morning coffee and realize you got to cough up more. And I find it interesting. I thought, it'd be around the same price, considering they're saving a lot more on labor costs. And they're saving a lot more on, actually imports, because they're cheapening up on their products. Again, that's private equity for you. They don't care about the product. They don't care about the service. They don't care about the customer. It's all about the value of the brand and the value of the restaurant property itself. That's all they care about. And there's also this to blame. Now, I can confirm nor deny that there is intention from the WEF to implement the rise of coffee prices. But I do find it interesting, and why I'm bringing this up is because they mention about coffee. And Wide Awake Media points out, are you prepared to quit coffee to save the planet from evil carbon dioxide? Evil. Carbon dioxide. You know, the thing we breathe out that trees take in to produce oxygen, a necessity of life for carbon-based mammals. That evil. So this is Swiss banker Hubert Keller speaking at the WEF. The coffee that we are all drink emits about 15 to 20 tons of CO2 per ton of coffee. Every time we drink coffee, we are basically putting CO2 into the atmosphere. Well, you know what? CO2 in the atmosphere is making things greener. And that's not me stating that. That's NASA. NASA did a whole report about the greening effort, that more CO2 in the atmosphere is helping the growth of vegetation, helping the growth of trees. Why? Because they eat the CO2. Photosynthesis, they eat CO2 and produce oxygen. This is grade 1 biology crap that I learned in school. And apparently we've all forgotten that. Apparently Bill Gates doesn't understand basic biology and thinks trees is unnecessary to fight climate change. So here's the Swiss banker telling you that you have to give up on coffee. Listen to this.
We'll be having our coffee before the session, and you raised the coffee example. I'd love just to give you the chance to expand on that.
Basically, the coffee that we all drink emits between 15 and 20 tons of CO2 per ton of coffee. So we should all know that. This is every time we drink coffee, we are basically putting CO2 into the atmosphere. One of the reasons is because most of the coffee plantation, or most of the coffee is produced through monoculture, and monoculture is also affected by climate change. The quality of these nature assets is deteriorating quite rapidly.
We'll be having our coffee before the...
So there you go. That's one of the members of the WEF suggesting that people may have to consume less coffee, or we're going to have to do something about it. Again, I can't confirm nor deny that they actually had impact on the rise of coffee prices, but I do find it very particular that they mentioned about this. This was back in July that video was published. And here we are in October where they're announcing rise in coffee prices, that they're looking at, impacts on global trade. They're looking at, the environment. They're looking at climate change. And again, I just find it very interesting that they mention about droughts. They mention about the severities of things, which understandably, yes, that is cause of concern. But you think at a time where we know that geoengineering and cloud seeding and manufacturing rainfall exist, wouldn't you try to build stations and systems to have rainfall in drought-stricken areas so you have more availability to these these products to the grow? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's almost like it's intentional. It's almost like they want to restrict people of these goods for their own demise. Just putting that out there. I can't confirm nor deny it, but I find it so intriguing that the WEF mentions about coffee consumption prior to these announcements. And we know that Mark Carney, the Liberal government, are also at fault here, and there's many other factors, but I just wanted to show that because that's fascinating. That's fascinating, folks. So, yeah, I really don't know how we're surviving, but I'm pretty sure if we don't look at this and respond accordingly, it's going to get worse. And as we showed before, the RCMP secret memo, that if Canadians knew how screwed this country is and its people are, there'd be an outright revolt. And I'm basically telling people that we kind of have to go in that direction. I think it's more than time to gather together, organize together, and from coast to coast, and fight for the dominion of this country, fight for the people, fight for, the real substance of this country and its culture and its people. That in order for us to survive, in order for us to maintain, we're gonna have to do that. Now, I'm not saying violently. I condone, political violence. I'm not saying that you need to burn down buildings. Obviously, that is out of the picture. But you need to organize. You need to drop the divisions. You need to come together and realize that this is affecting everybody. And this is basic essentials of human existence. If you don't have the ability to purchase food and water and shelter and heat and electricity and whatnot, then nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. It's that Maslow hierarchy of needs. So let's come together and focus on the essentials of what makes Canada and Canadians functionable, and how governments, these agencies, the WEF, global kleptocracies are trying to destroy that.